Hello, and thank you for joining. I see that right now we have about 23 participants. As I go through the general introductions, I know that others will be joining. So thank you, thank you. This is our second office hour of the year, and we're really excited to bring this to you. And so, if you're here engaging with us, we are in deep appreciation. If you're viewing this, please know that you can always get in contact with us. Next slide. So welcome. My name is Alicia Anderson. I'm a management and program analyst with the Office of Interagency Innovations here at ACL. If you're not familiar with ACL, I encourage you to visit our website at acl.gov. Next slide. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're so excited to bring this to you. We're here to support your work. This is a second of the three-part series featuring partnerships in Ohio between the housing sector and the aging and disability networks. Yes, it's our partners in Ohio, but what you'll find throughout this hour is that the information can be used where you're located. So share with us where you're located in the chat so that we know how to sense of relatability and we can really engage throughout this dialogue. So these collaborations are expanding options for older adults and people with disabilities to live in their communities with access to supportive services they may need. In this session and for the next hour, what you can expect is a real close look at service coordination models and sustainability. Next slide. But before we do that, I have to go through the instructions for Zoom. I'll make it quick. So this is being recorded. By staying, you consent to the recording. So for audio options, we ask that you use your computer speakers or you dial in using the phone number in the registration email. Please stay muted unless called upon. Chat, how does that work for you? Well, please actively use the chat throughout the meeting. Put whatever you want to put in the chat to really cause for engagement throughout this next hour. If you're having a question, you wanted to direct it to a particular presenter, the format will be questions for Duana, and then you'll ask your questions. Raise your hand, that's your Zoom hand. So I've actually raised my hand, but raise your Zoom hand. We're actively monitoring the chat, so we'll definitely see you. And at any point in time that you raise your hand, we'll stop to make sure that we engage with you. So please, the intention is for this to be an engaging hour, and we're asking for you to really support that. Next slide. So if you haven't heard, and I'm sure many of you have because we've had over 7,000 visitors so far, but we launched a website in December. We launched a Housing and Services Resource Center in December, and we made our website available at that point in time. Please visit our website. We'll load it in the chat, and it's here on the slide for you. Next slide. So HSRC is not just a website. HSRC is intended to facilitate a federally coordinated approach to providing resources, program guidance, training, and technical assistance to the disability and aging network organizations, state Medicaid agencies, mental health and substance use disorder service providers, homeless shelters, public housing authorities, and private housing providers. Next slide. The goal of HSRC is to coordinate and leverage technical assistance, training, and research efforts of HUD and our HHS partners. It's to reach a broad audience of aging, disability, housing, and homeless network and stakeholders. We ask you to help us spread the word. It's to facilitate state and local partnerships between housing and service systems. And it's to assist communities in leveraging new housing and services resources, including those from the American Rescue Plan and Build Back Better. Next slide. So what to expect for the next hour? Well, you can expect an engaged conversation. You'll expect to, listen directly and ask questions directly to the presenters and learn about how they're working to expand affordable housing. You can expect to really receive practical tips and real-world examples, and you can expect participants polling And we use that information to inform the next session that'll be held on February 10th. Next slide. So I'm trying to rush along because I know you're not here for me. And so how this will work, well, our presenters are going to give you a short presentation, and we're going to follow that by a long period where you can expect an engaging conversation of questions and discussions. But we're asking you that at any point in time as we move forward, please throw a question in the chat. Please raise your hand. We want this to be engaging, and we're looking to you to cause that. Thank you. And I'll hand the conversation now to Joanna for introductions.
Thank you, Alicia. And thank you all for being here with us this afternoon. Myself and my fellow Ohio colleagues are really excited to be here with you today. Joseph Ritchie, Justin Moore, and Calvin Thomas. We are looking forward to sharing information with you, but this is really, we're here for you. And so therefore we do encourage you to participate in the chat, raise your Zoom hand if you have a question, and then certainly at the end, we'll have time for some Q&A. So let's just jump right in with the next slide. For those of you that were with us at the HCSB conference or at our last office hours, we talked a lot about housing. Well, let's just be honest, housing, it is more than bricks and mortar. And what happens under an individual's roof is just as vital as the structure itself. And we believe that a service coordinator or the activity of service coordination can make a big difference. A service coordinator works with clients and residents to provide quality service and to ensure clients get the services they need. And in order to really successfully do that, a service coordinator needs to build strong relationships with community partners and service providers to ensure clients receive the best care possible. We're going to dive into both of those things with the next slide. Service coordination, it is a function. And I think it's really important to understand that service coordination is a function. Basically, that means that as a function, the title may differ across different organizations, but it is an active and ongoing process to assist individuals to get the services and supports that they need. So if you look at the model here in this particular slide, you see different things such as home ownership and counseling, medical, educational programs, childcare. And as our area agency, we do more than just senior housing. We do service coordination in multifamily facilities as well. Next slide. So the basics, service coordination is a function. And when deployed appropriately, it can provide value to those who have access to it. It does have funding challenges, and we're going to talk a little bit today about how we might overcome those funding challenges. And a service coordinator is the individual, the professional who is performing that role. We consider them a facilitator, an investigator, an advocate, an educator, or someone who is a networker. So you can see how service coordination isn't driven by position or by title. It could be anybody in an organization who is doing this type of work. So their role may not be service coordinator, but they are providing service coordination. Next slide. So a little bit about our model here at the Area Agency District 5 in Richland County. We serve 9 counties. We've been providing service coordination in low-income home housing properties for over 20 years, probably going on 30. We have 3 locations, all of which are senior housing facilities, and they are done under a grant from our state unit on aging. So we've had these grants for many, many years and continue to provide service coordination to seniors. So again, that is us connecting with the seniors in these particular facilities, connecting them with transportation. Perhaps they need assistance in finding a physician, or even scheduling a doctor's appointment, or even preparing them for a successful appointment with their doctor, coaching them on how they might ask questions. Again, it's everything to meet their needs so that they can remain independent in the place that they reside. We have 2 locations where we do service coordination, one of which is the multifamily. So we have young families, individuals over the age of 60 and under the age of 60, and those are paid by the developer or through the operational budget of the property. And I'm going to just turn to Joe and let him tell us a little bit about how that particular structure works.
Thank you, Dwana. I'm happy to share this with you. When a developer wishes to have a service coordination within their facility, they can pay for it out of the operating budget. The Federal Home Loan Bank and many of the state housing agencies on projects using the tax credit limit that service coordination amount that's allowed to be in the budget at $250 per unit year. So that's not a whole lot for service coordination. However, the developer can pay for it from its developer fee or from deferred developer fee on an unlimited basis if they so chose. They're actually, in that instance, sharing some of their development fee with the nonprofit in order to enhance the service coordination. The benefit of doing so, however, is investors, since it is part of the eligible basis for the tax credits, investors are paying from 50 to 90% of that service coordination fee. So it's a very valuable way to enter a project long-term and receive a large service coordination fee that is not borne by the residents in the form of rent, but simply added to the basis of the property and used for tax credits. And I'm happy to answer questions about it. It's going a little bit in the weeds, but it is an alternative that I feel strongly can be successful, and Dwana has used that in her operations.
Yes. Thank you, Joe. And we too believe that there's a lot of value, again, from a previous slide where we talk about housing is really more than bricks and mortar. It is really about the people who live there. And so we've had some really great conversations with the developers that we work with, in that, providing the individuals with the service coordination is just as important as, the layout of their unit or the appliances that they use. And what we have found, I know Calvin's going to talk about this, so I'm not going to steal Calvin's thunder, but, we also find that when there is a service coordinator in place, the success of the individual to remain in the unit that they live in is more likely. So I'll stop there because I know Calvin's going to talk about that later. So, but for our agency, there is more, because in 2020, we did something really exciting. And that is where we took our team of service coordinators and we elevated them by certifying them as community health workers. So if you go to the next slide, this gave us the ability then to expand the reach of funding that we receive. So we talked about the grants that we as an area agency get through our state unit on aging. Joe has talked about the development fees and the operational budget of the property. But when we elevated our service coordinators and certified them as a CHW, we were able to benefit from payment from third-party payers. If you go to the next slide, we'll dive into that. So a community health worker is a trained individual who really acts on behalf of the community-based organization, but in a manner where they are bridging between health and social services of the individual that they're working with and the community. It does require in Ohio, a minimum of 100 classroom hours and 130 clinical hours. And it is also a certification that is submitted and approved through the Ohio Board of Nursing. That may be different in other states, something that you would want to definitely look into. But for us, it definitely elevated our individual, gave them additional training, and they couldn't be more excited to have that certification behind their name and on their resume as well. So next, when we work with the CHW, it gave us another opportunity. So by having the CHWs, it allowed us to work with our local hub. And our local hub allows us to do pathways. And they are the organization that is contracted with these third-party payers, mainly managed care organizations. So when we received the CHW certification, our staff then could get referrals from our hub. And those referrals come in the form of an individual who is a member of any of the respective managed care organizations who are contracted with the local hub. Our service coordinator CHW, they then conduct what we call a pathway for the individual. And when that pathway is completed, the hub gets payment from the MCO, and then ultimately we get a share of that fee. So it does then bring in another level of reimbursement. I share this map because you can see here that there are not hubs all across the country. There are many pockets in Ohio, because I think that's where some of the hub work got started. You see more in Michigan, a little bit in Wisconsin, a couple down there in Texas, and then way up in Washington, you can see them. But this really does imply that, this is a great place to start. You can also see where they are actively looking to have certified hubs. But it is important to look into your community. And if you're in a state where you don't see any color, perhaps asking others around the area in your circles about the potential of having a hub, because anybody can become a hub. Next slide. So again, when we do service coordination and we utilize a qualified CHW and we have a contract with a hub, we then can get reimbursement from insurance carriers, managed care organizations, Medicaid, and Medicare, depending upon how the hub is set up and what contracts they have. Next slide. So this will just show you a little snapshot of a 12-month period for the Woods, which is a senior housing complex where we deploy our community health workers, our service coordinators. These are unduplicated numbers, but these represent pathways. So we may have an individual that comes to our service coordinator with housing issues, whatever that might be. They also might need some personal care or homemaker services. Each one of those represents a pathway. And our community health worker may complete one or more of those, but each time that they do, then it is submitted to the hub for reimbursement. Next slide. Service coordination, when done, and remember, service coordination is a function, so that doesn't have to be a service coordinator. I know that there are some organizations who perhaps do this CHW hub work through their ADRN, their Aging and Disability Resource Networks, maybe their referral department, maybe in other care management functions. But when service coordination is incorporated with the CHW, and there's a hub relationship, a contract with the hub, it does result in additional revenue streams. So connecting with the client, completing the pathway, the agency can receive payment from the MCO. Next slide. I am really excited to turn the next part over to Calvin, who's going to talk about the importance from a property management standpoint. Calvin?
Thank you, Dewana. Yes, in property management and over my years of working in multiple senior facilities and multifamily environments, the service coordination and the access of the service coordinator is invaluable. We found that in working closely with them, it provides kind of that third party mediator slash advocate that's able to, especially in a senior environment, help them in certain situations with financial assistance and also in health services, which is very important with seniors. We found in certain instances where seniors are needing, extended care or even short-term rehab, where the service coordinator can step in and kind of facilitate making sure that the rent gets paid, that the apartment stays in the proper condition for them to be able to come back home after that short-term rehabilitation, as opposed to being displaced. Of course, we know that we want everybody to be aging in place in these senior facilities. To piggyback off of what Dewana said, it is more than brick and mortar. The resident relations portion for any property manager, if there are people who are in this group, that you'll have many one-on-one relationships with several residents, and you need kind of that intermediary person that can come in and, you know, kind of take the burden off, and then also give that tenant the kind of relationship that they need to, you know, interpret bills and take them through, you know, accessing points for Medicaid and Medicare, and, you know, preparing for doctor's appointments, like Dewana had mentioned. Because, you know, these things can get confusing for them. And, you know, one slip up could lead to a loss of income, which, you know, some of these residents are on fixed income, so they don't have the money to lose, which makes that service coordinator all the more important. And as I think about it, even in small counties where you really don't have those access points to say, well, I can just go, you know, to, you know, point A to get, you know, the particular financial assistance, or, you know, if I need a ride to the store, or, you know, to visit a husband that may be, you know, outside of the household, that having that service coordination can get a person into that kind of, you know, they make a house a home almost for a senior in a sense. And it's been a great source for me in my career and going forward. And I'll also be able to answer any questions in regards to the property management piece. Thank you, Dewana.
Thanks, Calvin, for sharing that. Any questions, please put those in the chat, raise your hand. Calvin's going to be with us through the rest of the session. And next, I'd like to turn it over to Justin. And Justin's going to talk about the work that's being done in the Area Office on Aging of Northwest Ohio. Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Dewana. Before I jump in, I see that Juliana put a question in the chat for Joe. So Joe, so she gets a timely response here. I'll just read that aloud. Joe mentioned developers using a basis boost and tax credit development to fund service coordination. Is this specifically in the Ohio QAP process? This is a question for you, Joe.
And I answered it in the chat, but
no,
it's not a special set aside. It's actually the allocation of the development fee, which is set on limits in the various qualified allocation plans around the states. However, the development fees are quite generous. So in Ohio, a maximum fee in the 9% program is about $1.7 million for an average project size of about 50 units. So I'd consider that a pretty generous development fee. So the sharing of that fee for service coordination that enhances the project viability and sustainability seems appropriate.
Great, thanks, Joe. And just looking at some of the where organizations that individuals are on here, it looks like there may be varying levels of knowledge and experience with housing and affordable housing development for older adults in particular. So I don't want to assume knowledge. I know that I'm learning a lot in affordable housing development myself, and sometimes just having a little bit of background information is helpful. So I think there's really four main roles, significant roles with housing development. Just to quickly outline those, make sure everybody is understanding those potential roles for your organization in housing. One is as a development partner, so you can get a portion of those development fees that Joe talked about, and playing an active role with the development process of affordable housing. The second is as a potential owner or part owner in the development after it's done with the construction. The third is with management, which Calvin talked about that role. And then the fourth role is this housing service coordination that we're really taking a deep dive in here today. I think that, you know, in terms of this question of how we're weaving in case management to service coordination, I've heard, at risk of oversimplifying, because I have kind of a simple mind, if you're like me, having things stated kind of simply is helpful in wrapping your mind around a role. I've heard the role of the housing manager as being getting the individual to move into the apartment, right, that where there's a vacancy in place, and the housing service coordinator's role as helping them stay there, right, helping that resident age in place where they're at. And that's really, you know, a big focus of our care management is, you know, again, at risk of oversimplifying it, we really focus our case managers attention on helping individuals feel like they aren't prematurely being forced into a nursing home. We realize there's a time and a place for a nursing home, but we don't want people to feel like they're prematurely, having to go in a nursing home. If they want to remain in their own home, it's safe for them to do so and get the same kind of services brought into their home, into their own home to help them age in place. Similarly, we want to make sure that people aren't unnecessarily being admitted to the hospital, right? So that's one of the reasons why we're working with health plans. They see our role not in case management beyond just providing long-term services and supports like home health aid, helping with bathing and dressing, and getting home delivered meals, on so on and so forth. They really see how our case management can help individuals in the healthcare sphere and avoiding unnecessary admissions to the hospital, avoiding those prematurely having to go to a nursing home and the like. So in many ways, the case management works hand in glove with the service coordination. The service coordination is just kind of an extension of the case management that our agencies are providing. So those case managers who, pre-COVID might have been doing a home visit once a month for the individual, or maybe it's once a quarter, kind of depending on the individual's needs and how intense their needs are. What's even better than that is having somebody who's got daily eyes and ears on that individual. So let's say, for example, the individual that we're providing case management services for has congestive heart failure. That having that housing service coordinator be the individual that's under that same roof as that individual day in, day out, to be able to keep an eye on things like, does that individual all of a sudden have some unexplained swelling that they're experiencing? Maybe that means that they've had too much sodium lately, and maybe that's a potential red flag for their health condition that should be brought to their care manager's attention, so the case manager can do a necessary kind of intervention, again, to prevent an unnecessary this escalating and being brought to the attention of the case manager after the individual has been admitted to the hospital, when that hospitalization could have been avoided. So really this case management and service coordination work hand in glove with each other. The service coordination is being kind of an extension of the care manager kind of role that tends to be a licensed social worker or registered nurse with our agencies. So the health plans, again, realize the role that we are uniquely positioned to be able to play in providing case management and service coordination as an extension of that case management. In terms of how the model can be improved in the future with future housing development, we're really having conversations internally with our different care management programs. We have basically different flavors of case management, if you will. We have one that's done with with the Ohio Department of Aging and Ohio Department of Medicaid. We have another flavor of care management that's partnering with, we have 3 different healthcare plans that we're partnering with and contracting with. They're contracting with us for case management services. Each of those has kind of a different approach to case management they want us to take. And I think there's a real opportunity. Let's take, for example, a senior apartment complex, let's say, that's built with 100 individuals in it. Let's say 15 of those individuals are we're care managing with one, health plan, managed care plan A. Another 10 of those residents are with healthcare plan B, and then 5 with health plan C. There's an opportunity for us to have the individual that those residents and members call if they, for example, have their home health aide not show up and they need a replacement home health aide, or they need medical transportation arranged. Instead of that being somebody that they're calling that's at our corporate office, there's an opportunity, I think, for us to combine that service coordination role with what we would characterize as kind of a case manager assistant role, and have that individual be actually under the same roof as the individual resident who has those kinds of needs. So they're being really responsive. They have an opportunity to build that relationship. They have an opportunity to put a face with a name with the resident, and vice versa. So I really think that that's our opportunity for improving the model in the future, is really looking at ways that we can combine some of those activities that historically have been handled telephonically and from our corporate office, and be handled instead by that individual who is got service coordination responsibilities at the senior apartment complex. Next slide, please. So the area of Austin aging, we have 4 decades of growing to meet the growing needs of older adults. This housing is area of housing is one that our CEO, Mrs. Billy Johnson, has been a leader nationally in developing affordable senior housing. Started off about 35 years ago in 3 of our rural communities. We partner with a management company to handle the management aspect of those facilities. But we help either directly with our role as a direct service provider of services like case management, which is really kind of our view as our core service, direct service, or when we're put on the hat as a funder and are working with 180 different organizations that includes home health agencies, home delivered meal organizations, medical transportation providers, on and on. We're serving over 36,000 individuals a year. That's both people age 60 and better, as well as people under age 60 with physical disabilities. And what we're able to offer is a menu of services that are at little to no cost to the individual, but have real value to the residents that are living in these facilities. And again, the value is in the form of getting them the necessary supports that really help set them up for success in aging in place where they want to be in their own home. That includes things like home delivered meals, home health aid services, evidence-based health and wellness workshops like diabetes self-management program, falls prevention programs with Tai Chi, also transportation to medical appointments, that service coordination that I mentioned, and many, many other services and programs. Next slide, please. So we really think that service coordination, again, adds tremendous value in allowing us to take a deeper dive, if you will, into and having more touch points with the individuals that we're serving, and having a more meaningful relationship with them, so that we're able to, again, these residents are able to know who it is that they should call when they need help. And that provides tremendous peace of mind to these individuals who are residing in these senior apartment complexes, to know that if they need something, they know who the person is to contact, that that person is somebody they can trust. They've built up a rapport with that individual over years, and that they are able to get a timely response to their needs. And we really view this as a great opportunity for us to do more in this area of housing. We know that fragmented care is not healthy to anybody, and that this is a way of, the vast majority of healthcare is determined in the individual's home. And to the extent that we can partner with those individuals and helping them make healthy choices and the like, and access to services that are beneficial to them, then that's just helping kind of further our agency's mission. It also is an opportunity for us to get some increased revenue as well as flexible revenue that we can reinvest into the services and programs that I mentioned earlier. And then in terms of the clients, again, vast majority of people want to live in their own homes for as long as it's possible, as long as it's safe for them to do so. These services that we're talking about are a critical way of us setting those individuals up for success and meeting their outcomes of living in their own home for as long as possible, avoiding unnecessary hospitalizations and the like. And so this is, we over the last 35 years have developed this proven track record of helping individuals do just that, age in place where they want to be in their own home.
Justin, John Sorensen asked this question, and it kind of underscores your selection of the word options. He wanted to know if this is mandatory with the housing, but really you're presenting us kind of dynamic optional program to keep people living independently, if that's right.
Correct.
Yeah, independent living, so it's not actually set up as an assisted living model or controlled model.
Absolutely. So this is an invitation, if you will, to all the residents that at the day of move-in, they know what's available to them. If they choose to, pursue any of those, it's a real easy access for them to pursue any of those options, those service options that exist. But again, we're not in a position to force feed services on anybody, nor do we think it's wise to do so. So this is just an invitation to individuals. This is a menu of services and programs that are available. It's not a complicated process to navigate accessing any of those. It's a matter of either stopping by the service coordinator's office right there in the housing facility, or picking up the phone and calling the individual who's there, you know, on a daily basis.
I think I think Calvin made this point as well, is that the service coordinator is there as much for the residents as for the management company. So we recently had an incident where an individual is going to be evicted based upon the manner in which they maintain their unit. And there were health and safety issues that were exuding beyond their four walls. And, you know, the management company needed to do what they had to do, but then could refer the individual to the service coordinator, who could then help the resident overcome whatever the barriers were to keeping his unit in the way it needed to be maintained. And lo and behold, we were able, through the service coordinator, to, you know, reduce the risk of homelessness, basically, for this individual. So I think the value proposition is not just for the resident, but as others had alluded to, it's there for the management company as well.
Yeah, and it helps that it's a third party, because, you know, having a discussion on the disciplinary side is one thing. You know, when you have to come and, you know, everybody's got to come see the principal, and, you know, I'm the bad guy that, you know, told Ms. Jones that she can't have all this stuff, might be too much clutter, or, you know, any of those particular instances. But when you have that third party, it just kind of eases it. You know, it creates an atmosphere where, okay, you know, this person, you know, kind of has my back, you know, as opposed to the big bad principal, and they're able to work with them in those situations, you know, to avoid any evictions or displacements and stuff like that. You know, I joke with my senior residents. I tell them, you know, as a younger man, I need them to keep these services around, you know, for when I get older, you know, because seniors get all the stuff, you know, they get all the grab bags and goodies. I need all the stuff to be around when I make it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the other point that I just want to add on is that with any position nowadays, especially, there's inevitable turnover that exists, right? So that's also true with the property management kind of role. And what we've seen, especially with property managers that oftentimes are splitting their full-time hours across multiple buildings, there is something to be said for having the service coordinator as that consistent person that's there to cover some of those gaps when there is kind of that turnover with a property manager. I know that, you know, sometimes the quickest way to double the size of a problem is to kind of turn your back on it, or for it to be kind of neglected. So if a resident has an issue that is kind of a small pebble in the shoe, annoying kind of issue, and there's not a property manager there to talk to, you know, about that issue, having a service coordinator there to at least be an ear that they can vent about the issue sometimes provides, again, tremendous peace of mind, and also goes a long way toward improving resident satisfaction.
Very good. And also, as we had mentioned, or I think I mentioned early on in the presentation, that it is important, to Justin's point, that the service coordinator is a, you know, knowledgeable individual that knows what is going on in the community. And, you know, property managers, they need to deal with, you know, all the rules and regulations of leasing and maintaining buildings, whereas the service coordinator, they know the latest and greatest and where there are funds available. So, you know, keeping the service coordinators, CHWs, well informed of what's happening in the communities is really important. And before we go to a Q&A, I did also want to mention that, you know, a couple of the things that we use in our organization to make sure that our service coordinators, you know, have the latest and greatest and have access to resources. We rely on the American Association of Service Coordinators, and we also give them access to the National Association of Community Health Workers. So they're great resources that are out there from a national perspective, who can really provide best practices and insight and access to national resources as well. So with that, I think next slide. All right, Q&A. It's everybody else's turn. We are looking forward to your questions, comments.
Duana, this is Alicia. I'm combing through the chat, and I'm seeing that we have some real huge players in this space. And it would be good, I won't call them out, but it would be good if we could hear from them.
I agree.
Well, while we wait, Duana, just a quick question. And if someone asks a question, just, bypass my question and just go straight to that. But you continue to say housing is more than bricks and mortar, bricks and mortar. You repeated that several times. So I have a question for you, and I think that Justin can definitely contribute to this as well. And it really is looking at, when did you start developing your board's knowledge and interest in housing issues? And if you could talk about that for us, that'd be great.
So I'll start that out. We talked about service coordination, and our conversation started when we realized that we could do more than service coordination, that we were able to really play in the space of development, because it became more than just providing services and supports. Over the last few years, it's been, where are these people going to live? And so we began having conversations from the perspective of, what are the pain points in our respective communities, and where do we already have experience and knowledge, and how can we do more? Let Justin respond.
Yeah. So, I've definitely been learning the hard way at times with the whole board education and engagement process. And part of this is because, again, our CEO 35 years ago built these 3 senior apartment complexes. So at the time, the board members 35 years ago were very engaged in that process, very well educated in that process. Then, we continue to own those properties, continue to make enhancements to them. But again, we're kind of removed from the day-to-day operations of it, because we contract out the management of those properties. So a lot of our newer board members really had not much in the way of training or education on this whole affordable housing development piece. So as our agency now is getting back into the affordable housing development area, there was a need to train board members anew on this whole topic, get a feel, of the pulse of how engaged they want to be in that process, how deep of a dive do they want to get into the education. So we've had just about a few weeks or a month ago, board informational sessions on this housing topic, where we brought in different speakers that are experts in this area to help with that education process. And that went a long way, I think, toward increasing the comfort level that our agency is getting back into a more active role with affordable housing development. So I see also that Lori asked a question about where are the funding streams, sources that can support service coordination. You mentioned tax credit financing, Medicaid, managed care organizations. Are there others? I think that Dewana talked about the Pathways Hub as being another one that she's really been a leader, I believe, nationally in pursuing. And that's something that we're planning on pursuing as well. Just to be real concrete about it, with the tax credit applications in the past, we many times would have developers kind of knock on our door almost as an afterthought right before they click the submit button for their tax credit application, saying, will you sign this letter of support saying that you're in support of us building this affordable housing? We would sign off on it. Then they would say, thank you very much. They would get their tax credits, and we never hear from them again. So we're trying to be more intentional now when developers are contacting us about entering into a memorandum of understanding with them that makes our expectations clear about our desire to, if they do get the tax credits, if they do build it, that we want to be a service partner, and we want to specify in there a good faith effort will be made by both parties to enter into a service agreement where they are paying us a certain dollar amount for us to provide our employee as a service coordinator on site in their facility. And with the Medicaid managed care plans, just to be real specific about that as well, right now there's that case manager role that's funding, that the managed care plan contracts are funding in our agency. And that's, again, an individual that's doing the home visit kind of, at least pre-COVID, home visits once a month or maybe once a quarter. And then there's also a second role of a case manager assistant, which is more that person who individuals call if they need a home health aid replacement because their home health aid didn't show up, or they need medical transportation booked and the like. Those Medicaid managed care contracts are also funding that position. Again, if we're able to take that case manager assistant role and combine it with the housing service coordinator role, we have another funding stream to be able to legitimately do more in the way of housing service coordination than we otherwise would be able to.
And just to put a little more flesh on that with Justin's work, just yesterday we submitted, along with the area agency, proposals to the city of Toledo for 2 projects totaling 178 units that are senior housing with service coordination. And in that is built in $1,000 per unit year of service coordination fee indexed at 3.5% to cover inflation over a 15-year period. So between those 2 projects, there's the dedication of over $3 million for service coordination, and that's all derived internally from the project economics itself. I'll add another variation on this is something Dwana's done without the tax credits and without investors. She simply competed for local funding, home funds, for a small project, which lowered the amount of financing that was required, produces a surplus, and she can recycle those income dollars back into her service coordination. So that's a model that's available in any small community in the country right now because of the ARP funds being distributed for that purpose.
And with Ohio specific, there's also some senior community services line item kind of funding that can be used for this purpose. There's a possibility of Older Americans Act Title 3B funding to be able to be used. Also in Ohio, there's a lot of county senior services levy funds. That's another possible use for some of this service coordination activity. So a lot of it really depends on the geographic area, what options might exist, but there are a variety of different funding sources that could be used for this purpose.
And I noticed also in the chat here, Julia, had a question and that, indicating basically that they've been, alarmed by the lack of HUD investment and service coordinators. And so when we talk about funding and, I think we started out saying it's definitely underfunded. So I'm looking forward to seeing what will happen in the future because we've seen an uptick during COVID in the need for our service coordinators to be, present and available for individuals who, we're not just navigating normal day-to-day stuff, but now COVID and pandemic and all the things that came there. But I am anxious to see what advocates can do in the future to really, advocate for, policy change, funding changes that, increase the, the importance of service coordination and therefore hopefully in turn, there is funding that will support, that the important role that the service coordinators play. So she asked specifically, are you working with the HUD MFH team to increase HUD investments in this area? And I'm not aware of anything formally. I'm going to look to my peers here and even people out there. If you're aware of anything, please share that, raise your hand or include something in the chat. Nothing there. Maybe we need to do a little homework.
I'd be willing to provide a testimony because I've been spoiled by having service coordination at all of my sites throughout my career. So I can't imagine not having it. It should be more widespread because of the seniors, and I speak a lot to the seniors because they have more one-on-one interaction with the property management anyway. Their need to have somebody in their corner, especially as they get older, the younger Spire seniors are, they'll push you out the way. They don't really need to talk to you. But, as you get up in age, 80 and 90 years old, at Corbin, we've had residents that are, 96, 98, even 99 years old. And, every day is valuable to them. So, the older they get, the more help that they need. And, it has to be more than just us because, we play service coordinator. We like to dress up and say that we have all the resources and everything else, but we don't know it all. And you guys do have the latest and greatest. And, there are a lot of residents, even in new builds, new constructions, they deserve to have these opportunities and access to these programs as well.
And Calvin, one thing that I do want to put in is that HUD is a partner with HHS in this space. And we will forward this question to HUD and provide you with a written response. So we don't want to speak up for HUD because we know that this is a HUD program and we really want you to know that we expect to pass that forward. And you can expect to see it on our website.
Thanks, Alicia. Thanks. I also see a question here from Patty. Can you comment on how you think the new HUD appraisal guidance, which clarified the criteria for services being considered as part of the fair market rent, will impact the ability to put together financing for complexes that provide enhanced service? And I don't, Joe.
I can respond to that, Patty. The service coordination component that is part of the operating budget, that does affect the appraisal. And however, all of this housing, the market studies and the research is based on independent living. The service coordination is actually additive. The housing itself is its own valuation. So by separating those two, the service coordination does not impair the underwriting for the HUD financing.
And Jody, thank you for your patience. Jody's question was, is this, and I think this is a fantastic question, is the CHW the only certification for service coordinators? And I would have to say no. I think, again, referring to the American Association of Service Coordinators is a great place to start. But I do know that there are other certifications. For example, if you're not familiar with CORES, C-O-R-E-S, that is a certification for an organization who does development and or provide service coordination as a part of development. I also know that there's a myriad of training, and so I don't know what what comes along with that training, but I know a couple of our local colleges do that. And then I think if you again look on some of those resources, there are certifications that are available, and I think that also depends on what your service coordinator is doing. So I know that some of our coordinators who are in our ADRN, they're AIR certified. I mean, there's a myriad of certifications. So I would definitely say that CHW is not the only opportunity. The CHW is the pathway, for lack of a better term, that gets them into the hub work and getting reimbursement from the MCOs.
And I saw a question from John Ballard, who is from with the Center for Independent Living, asking if the developers seek out us or if we kind of recruit them or investors. I think that, Joe, you may want to weigh on the investor part of it. But from the development standpoint, I think it really kind of depends on where you're at with your involvement with housing. I think that the more you make it known in the community that you are actively engaged with this whole affordable housing development space, I think the more likely you are to get those knocks on the door from developers and or them reach out to you in some other way. But if you're kind of newer in the space, I think that you may need to be a little bit more active in reaching out to some of the developers in your area about your interest in being a service partner or helping with being a development partner or being involved with having an ownership stake and the like. So Joe, I don't know if you have anything to add on to that.
Yeah, I do actually. Both your organization, Justin, and Duana's organization have done a really good job of what I would call soft marketing. It's very low cost marketing, just announcing to the communities in which you're serving that you're quite interested in the issue of housing and how to support it. And that alone, it generates interest from parties that might come to the city and ask for help or seek direction to find affordable housing opportunities. So developers will find their way to your door. The other part of this is, I think you mentioned the people asking for the MOU at the late date. And my suggestion is to prepare for that with a kind of yes and response. You will always say yes, you're happy to do it. And these are the circumstances under which we could do it. And I think you described that. It's like, be right up front, have a plan for that right up front. what does that service coordination mean? What are the standards you set? I know Dwana did a really good job of just laying out the standards. It's a concrete proposal. It has a dollar amount attached to it, and it has to be a long-term contract. So there's no fluff in it from the standpoint of being asked to participate and then ignored later. So I do think both of those things, the yes and approach where you're prepared to respond, and the other is the soft marketing by just announcing to the communities your vital interest in housing and supportive services and just seeing what happens.
Thanks, Joe. See a question here from Melissa Harris that a really great question. Are the service coordinators in the Pathways Hub model working in HUD funded properties? And without taking it too big of a dive into the hub model and how that works, basically the answer is they don't have to be. Our service coordinators actually will take referrals from our hub pathway regardless of where the individual lives. So the bonus is if the individual lives in a facility where we are doing service coordination with a certified community health worker, and they are, conducting a pathway for an individual who is with an MCO member tied to the hub, we get reimbursement. But the great thing about being contracted with the hub is the hub may call us and say, hey, we've got a member with Aetna who is in need of housing or is in need of transportation. We'd like to refer them to the community health worker to complete that pathway. And so it becomes another referral source. And so if our community health worker has the capacity to take that referral, they will. And that's where I was indicating that the CHW certification doesn't have to be tied to service coordination. It could be tied to anybody in the organization who has, the skill set and the ability to do those pathways, because that's what we do in community-based organizations, is we take referrals and we help people identify what all their needs are and help them get to the result of meeting that need. And so that is a pathway. And if we can get paid to do that, we want to get paid to do that. So we will take any referral from the hub and work to complete that pathway and get paid when we do. So I hope, Melissa, that answered your question.
So we have about 3 more minutes to go. So I think that we can probably get to one last question. And that's perfect. We're glad we're able to respond to you well, Melissa. And thank you for that question. So this could be directed to Calvin, Dwana, or Justin. And the question is, what are ways property management companies can link with CBO's service coordination programs?
I'll give a plug for Elder Care Locator. I think it's a great way to identify the area agency on aging in your area.
That works.
Justin nailed it. Yep.
He's exactly right.
It's the go-to.
You gotta use Justin. He knows exactly what he's talking about.
I call that the go-to Google for aging, all things aging.
That is fantastic. Do you all have any closing remarks before I wrap this up?
I guess just on behalf of all of us, Alicia, and everybody here on this call and in this session, thank you so much for your interest in the topic. We are always here. If you have questions later down the road, please let us know.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I consider you guys rock stars. You bring so much rich information, and your willingness to share is just powerful, because it's through these conversations that we'll really move this space forward. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Just a plug for what's coming up next: cross-sector partnerships to expand options for housing, Thursday, February 10th from 3 to 4, and that will be the last of the 3 office hours that we have planned in this series. So if you have not registered, please do so. There's we'll put the link in the chat. So thank you, and next slide. And again, this work is for you. If there was something that didn't work well that you would like to see as we move forward, please email us. If you have questions as you're going along, or maybe you're watching this recording, later down the road, please email us. Let us know what you need to support your work. Again, we're here to move you forward. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you again in February. Thank you.